3:50 p.m. In the Memphis City Council Committee Room. Mr. Backus, please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Ozier? Here. Ozier. Ms. Bennett? Here. Mr. Harris? Here. Mr. Moore? Present. Councilwoman Johnson? Present. Councilman Robinson? Councilwoman Robinson? Councilman Warren? Present. Councilman Jones? Here. Chairwoman Easter Thomas?
Present. Thank you. Thank you all for being here on today. Hopefully you're having a good day. Thank you for being here and being engaged. You have a couple of printed things on your desk table in front of you, and we'll get to those as they come up in the presentation. Just wanted to say that we did have subcommittee meetings on last Saturday here in the Memphis City Council chambers downstairs, and then also the previous Thursday it was held as well. I do want to say that there was a request for a communications subcommittee meeting to be held virtual, and we let them know that we would like for it to be in person, and so we're waiting on an update for that next meeting to be set as well. So for the mapping subcommittee, you should have those minutes printed with you so that you can see that from this past Saturday, March 11th. And we also have some maps that are part of those minute updates. So I can turn it over to Ms. Bennett and then Mr. Harris, respectively, as y'all want to do that. If Ms. Bennett, you want to highlight anything in the minutes that we need to make sure we see, and then Mr. Harris, if you want to let us know what we're looking at with these printed maps in front of us.
Thank you. I know my minutes are pretty detailed, and that's because,
It's on.
It's on.
Put it.
I just need to pull it closer.
We like detail, Ms. Bennett.
Okay. Thank you. I did make it detailed because ambiguity leaves too much wiggle room. So, I know everybody's not able to attend every meeting, so I tried to provide as much detail as possible. I did provide explanations or information regarding each of the proposed or concept maps from Dr. Harris. And I'm not going to go through those. I think everyone can read those for themselves. He did both single district and super district maps. We did have one community member who addressed the subcommittee with a question regarding how we are defining neighborhoods and communities. And his question came about because during the discussion of the maps, in multiple meetings, we made note of trying to maintain communities or keep communities together, whether it's with the different precincts and within the district. And so this community member did want to know how we were defining communities. And so that explanation is given as well with that. And let's see. The one thing that I wanted to note that I asked for clarification is about committee members' attendance of meetings virtually. I know that I have been here since the first meeting, tried to be present when I'm able, and there have been meetings when I have not been able to attend because of health, medical appointments, transportation issues, because I do not drive. And when that happens, I watch the meetings because I take this seriously and I want to be informed when I am able to be present. The subcommittee or community members were told that early on that we could not participate in meetings as committee members virtually, that if we did, we would be able to participate as private citizens. And even then, I have participated virtually by viewing, but not able to comment or ask any questions. Last Thursday's meeting, Councilperson Robinson was able to communicate through virtually, not physically present. And so I did ask a question, what was the difference with that? So that, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to address it, but that was part of the meeting minutes. And then there was some information about the next time we'll meet, and the meeting was adjourned.
Thank you for that. And I'll just reiterate that thank you for the detailed minutes. It really helps bring the context you all's discussion. I'm sure that by the end of the meeting today, we'll have some items to request an answer for from Attorney Wade, so we'll add that on there in one succinct document. And I'll just keep it with I do want to let the record show that Attorney Janika White is here, and I'll just keep it with you all for the mapping subcommittee. However, y'all need to present everything you have. So I'll turn over the floor to you all. Are there any questions, comments, needs at this point? All right, turning over the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Derek D. Harris, Mapping Subcommittee. So we're going to go through a few maps. I'm going to quickly go through stuff that we've already seen and then talk quickly about some of the changes I've made since the last couple of meetings we've had. What you currently see on the board, and I will, on the screen, and I will reference back to it frequently, is the current city, well, that's actually 2021. You have the 2022 City Council member council district map. I believe this is the current map. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. The first one was the 21. I'm going to reference back to this several times to show what some of the differences are with compared to what we've done in terms of moving precincts and trying to change some things around and offer some alternative proposals. I'm going to go through this real quick. Most of y'all have seen this, but I want to really talk about precincts because this has come up about districting. This has been something that I've dealt with over the years. There's a lot of confusion around why can't we just move this or move that and move this over there and move that over there. Because of the way the precincts are set up, and that's done by the state via the Election Commission, it makes it extremely, wait a minute, it's not, okay, I'm sorry, it's kind of slow. But anyway, the spatial data can be extremely...
Hold on, Mr. Harris. Before you get into all of that question from Councilman Warren.
We were talking a little bit before the committee, and I'm thinking that no matter what we do, if we have any major change, people are going to be changing their precincts and doing all sorts of things. And it seems to me that it would make more sense to try to keep us together and not worry if we're splitting up the precincts. You know, if what we can do is give a cogent reason why we've got a neighborhood together and this precinct has 3 different groups voting in it, then that makes sense if we can come up with a plan. So I don't know if just because precincts are being split up, that should be what determines us. And I think it's a discussion point for the committee. Think about it as we move forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So you're talking about cohesive neighborhoods, and if precincts get split up, they get split up as long as the neighborhood is together is what you're talking about as a discussion.
That was push on us from the state. We can design our voting district.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So let me just first say that when we started this, we started with the premise that we would try to keep the integrity of the current precincts. But I agree you can split those precincts. But I just want to, let me be clear, when I started this, when we started this whole conversation, we started the mapping proposals, we tried to adhere to that starting out. All right? So I just want everybody to see how these things look and see how confusing they can be. And then when you take a look at, I think it's kind of slow today. There we go. All right. There's a slight delay between when I change and you guys, so let me know when the slides change. There's going to be a couple I'm just going to stay on. So this slide shows, and I showed this the other day, the actual population numbers within the precincts. So not only are they not they're not symmetrical, they're also not proportional. So every time, so it's not just a matter of, well, just scoot that over there, or move this over there. You ought to be able to do that. So for example, I'll just give a quick example. Here's a good example. So if I just wanted to move this somewhere, so I'm moving 11,000 people. If I move 11,000 people, say here, then I've got to come up with 11,000 more people along these lines. So I may have to move 2 precincts in order to do that, or 3 for it to balance out, or I'm going to be over, or I'm going to be under. Now, that's this side of the equation, but that's going to affect the map all the way around. So whenever you change something dramatically, then you change it the other way. Now, splitting the precincts does allow you to be able to sort of split the difference, so to speak. So there's some advantages there that again, we didn't start out with that premise, but I will show you some splitting that I did do as just an example or a proposal today. We've already seen these maps, so I'm going to skip over all of these. Yes. Go back to the precincts. Okay.
Yeah, if you could go back to the yes, right there. So if what I did notice, and this was presented Saturday, what I did notice is that there are some that do not have numbers.
Okay. Say it again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there are some that don't have numbers, right.
Oh,
well,
that's
no, that's Cordova there,
Yeah.
but within the city limits of Memphis. So, for instance,
No.
these two.
I know.
Okay.
So if you notice that little yellow part at the bottom, it's because of scaling, because this was just for presentation purposes, that in order to see all that, you have to blow this up. That's one reason these maps look the way they do, and you see the stuff kind of small. So as you blow that up, you'll see them. That's one reason I said this is for presentation only.
Okay.
So there's going to be some precincts where you can't see the numbers, but there are similar problems in terms of them not being symmetrical and not being proportional. So it's
Right.
the same problem all the way around. So yeah, I agree. You just can't see it. It's
Right,
there.
and so what I felt that, because this was very instructive for me, colleagues, because I went to the meeting Saturday. We've never seen anything like this before. And so when we have these numbers before us, then we can sort of have some rationale between, okay, well, if we do, and let's just say, and I don't know this for certain, but you see down here at the bottom, the 7805, that might be the airport area. Mm-hmm. Let's just say that line coming down there is Elvis Presley. Well, there's some rationale between, okay, well, do we want to go east of Elvis Presley, if you would, if that's the case. And so having these numbers here, I found to be very instructive, and to go back to say why I felt that this committee is necessary. We've never looked at this, and we've made decisions and approved decisions based upon numbers that we never knew that existed. And so I just want us to be, as we are contemplating this and looking at this, this has just been very helpful. And when we get to those instances where you can present those numbers, I think that's going to help us as we have these discussions. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna jump past if y'all don't mind. Oh, sorry, Dr. Moore.
I was going to say, I just got a motion to bring to the committee, but you finish up and then I'll bring my motion. Okay.
So I'm actually finished with this. I don't know if you want to do the motion before I keep going.
Maybe the time. What I'd like to move is that what we do is see a map that doesn't take in precincts into account to make community-based voting districts that make sense if you look at our community structure, even if, we have to split precincts, and we have to split a lot of them. Because, it doesn't make any sense to me that we've got this map that came from the state and precincts, and somehow we're supposed to make it work for our citizens where they're voting for someone who's going to represent them in their neighborhood. So if we could do that, I'd like to see what that might look like.
And I haven't finished.
I move that we do that, and I need a second.
What's your motion?
My motion is to have a voting map that does not take precinct structure into account, but takes into account neighborhood structure and population.
Do you want to, you sure you want to make that motion, or do we want to finish going through this and then talk about moving forward?
Okay, I'll hold and I'll
Okay.
make it at the end. Thank
Just
you.
because I don't know, we want to see what's all about.
And I actually have something that's close to that where I have split a few precincts. And I've got something else I worked on where I actually did exactly what you said, but I didn't bring it to present it because I've done a lot of different iterations of the maps to see, hey, what would it look like if we did this? But I'll show y'all that later. Let me skip through this, but I wanted y'all to see the difficulty in this because the spatial data is extremely misleading when you first look at it. It looks like you ought to just be able to move this and move that. But if one of those precincts has 10,000 in them and it's very tiny, and there's another precinct that's huge and it's only got 2,000 people in it, you got a problem. All right, so let me jump through this. Yes, ma'am.
Use your mic.
Thank you. When you say huge, you mean land mass?
Geographic. Yeah.
Okay, not people.
Right,
Okay, thank you.
And in redistricting, that's the most misleading part of this. You see large geographic areas and you assume it's a lot of people because it's spatial data, but sometimes it's just geography. And so that's one reason why when I started this, I talked to the committee about let's find neighborhoods, let's find communities, let's try to bring as many together as possible. It's going to be extremely difficult to do it in every case, but we tried to do that in what I put forward. So single plan 2 and 1, I think you guys have already seen. I'm going to jump, if you don't mind. I think I presented it. Were you here last week? Yeah, I presented too. You want to see it again? No. Yeah, we jumped to 5 because what happened is after I first presented them, there were questions and potential changes that folks wanted to see. And so going through the iterations, I went from like 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's why you had those skips.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Chairman. We're looking for 3 and 4. Because
There is no 3 and 4. I jumped to 5. And then I had 6 that I presented Saturday, I believe. I know I'm jumping through this, y'all, because I'm gonna come back. So 6, because everything else has been seen. That's the stuff that I presented the other day. Today, I'm showing you 6. 6 is a result of the conversation that we had last Thursday's meeting. So I presented this Saturday after making the changes from the meeting from Thursday. And I'm gonna make this bigger so we can see streets. And I'm gonna basically I took the feedback that I received from the committee and came back and I moved precincts around and changed some things around. And I will go through it. If y'all don't mind, I'm gonna bring this up on a larger scale so you can really see it. All right. So I think the changes that came up in Thursday's meeting, because there were changes that came up in Saturday's meeting, so there's been a lot of changes. And I'm going to show y'all 7 as a result of those changes. And then there's a 7 revised, and I didn't bring the data, I haven't finished, but I'll show y'all the draft of it. The major things that I showed was, and I'll explain again, as we talked about keeping the community together, we did make a change to District 1, and we moved it on the west side of the I-240 and brought that from Cordova, and we took Cordova, for lack of a better phrase, proper, and put it all back together. They were just a little bit short on having population, so we pulled in just a few more precincts, and we almost basically came up with a perfect district right at 90,000 and some change. That was one change that we made. And if you look at all the iterations that I presented, with the exception of, I think, one iteration, all of them include some variation of bringing this one community together. And as I was talking earlier when I first got here, one of the reasons why I focus so much on this area, currently this area is basically broken up between 2 districts. Generally in good redistricting practices, if there is an area that can legally have a population that is near 5, up 5, or below 5%, above 5%, and have a 10% total population deviation, they can legally support a district based on their population, you should seek to try to create a district for that area, particularly when it has grown, and particularly when it's become more diverse, rather than breaking it up. There have been a lot of cases and also stories about what's considered cracking and packing, and I won't talk a lot about that today. But part of cracking and packing is just basically cracking up districts unnecessarily, and then packing geographic racial minority groups in other areas to gerrymander the district. Now, I'm not implying that this is some kind of intentional gerrymander the way it was before under the old map, under the current 2022 City Council map. However, if this area can support a district and falls within the 10% deviation, we should seek to try to do that, especially when we also can bring together the Raleigh community as much as we can. Now, obviously, and I'm gonna finish, and let me finish this one point. Especially when it doesn't negatively affect the area that I separated it from, which is Raleigh. Obviously, I had to bring more people into Raleigh to have the population. I'm not going down to Sam Cooper for any reason other than picking up population. In a perfect world, I wouldn't have to do that. But in all these iterations, people don't live in chunks of 90,443. And that's what we're trying to achieve. Yes, sir.
My question actually is for you, and is there any way that we could split any of these screens up? Okay, because the fact that we can't, and this was something that was discussed in the committee meeting Saturday, and this is our 2022, this is how we currently look. And so part of it here, if we look at Councilwoman Logan's district, and that's the part that we talked about. So from the standpoint where we have largely Raleigh, do we really want to go, and before we revised it to this, Raleigh going all the way to the Shelby County, to the Fayette County state line, do we really have districts like that? So the issues in Eads are going to be vastly different from the issues in Raleigh. So if we can keep those together using some type of natural, if you would, even if it's an interstate, some natural boundary lines, that's what I sort of see this trying to do, and that's what we should want to do. If we have a huge interstate, we shouldn't have two districts or a district, and with the interstate being major, still knowing what the election commission has done. But if we can keep what would be each one of our districts as confined as possible, particularly when we talk about something as major as an interstate or major highway, I just think that makes makes a lot of sense for us to do. And the prima facie case for this was Councilwoman Logan's district that went from, if you look at where it breaks off, separating Councilwoman Easter Thomas's district. So from that point here, if you would, all the way to the county line, to me is, I don't think that's, I don't see what the purpose is in that and how that best serves the people that Councilwoman Logan represents in this particular instance that I just wanted to make that point.
And let me echo that.
Comment?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Ms. Bennett and then Councilman Warren.
I concur with Chairperson Jones. I am a 25-year resident of District 1. I live in the Raleigh area. Before I retired, I worked in Cordova, and I said this Saturday. So I'm someone who has some knowledge of both communities. I worked at Cordova High School. The concerns and issues that I have as a resident of Raleigh are not the same concerns and issues that present themselves for the community of Cordova. And so with this map, I think it does give, it meets the numerical or data questions or population, and it also gives those people who are in communities, which we talked about Saturday, an opportunity to have representation that meets our particular needs. Thank you.
Councilman Warren.
Yeah, as you look at this, I agree, but what you've done is, in order to do that, you've pretty much taken 5 and decimated it. So District 5 no longer is the same district. It doesn't really have a rhyme or reason for being. And there are ways that you could take parts of 5 and make it to where it would work better, which is why I want to look at my motion, because you see 5 is there. It's pretty much straight in the old map. Look at it now, and it looks like it's just a tangle, going up. But here it is. You can see that's 5 there. Let's see the map. You look at the.
Take the mic with you, Jim.
Yeah. So if you look at 5 is there. Let's throw band 6 up, and you can see 5 is sort of uniform, with the exception where it goes down to Parkway Village. And now when you see 5, slide that over if you can. Make it smaller. One more time. Okay, that's it. Now you can see 5. It's sort of what used to be 5 on that map was an area that went like this. And now you come up and down, go around, go way up here, and still go down in that same area. And you're over here in East Memphis and Midtown. So, 2 different areas. So in my mind, we may have put some things together, but we've damaged that. So we ought to be able to figure out how we do both.
Can I
Go ahead.
I just want to add, as somebody that lives in the little cutout part, I just want to note that a big chunk of that is Binghamton, which probably has more in line with what's above it than to the left and the right of it. From East Memphis and Midtown, I think, personally. But yeah, I think that's definitely something we should talk about.
May I respond? So, in going through iterations and going through redistricting, obviously some things are going to change, and they're going to be trade-offs. Let me specifically go through this, and let me address some of those issues.
Well, let me add one thing as you come into that. And as a super district member too, one of the things that I've heard, particularly from downtown, is that they want one representative. So from South Bluff to Harbortown, I think that a resident of downtown, those residents will probably have, when they're trying to communicate whatever issue is to their council person, but to have to confer with Councilman Ford, if you live in South Bluff, but then Councilwoman Easter Thomas, if you have to live in Harbortown, where if we're talking about some of the issues for downtown residents, they still are the same whether or not you live in Harbortown or Harbortown or South Bluff. Still trying. So a theme of this too, hearing everything as we talk about this cornucopia, what we're putting together with this map too, is addressing, hey, and I'm looking at, I know you got to look at it from your lens, I got to look at it from mine. Does downtown have one? From the standpoint of what we're trying to accomplish with this, should Cordova have 2, which they currently have right now, do we bring, so part of this compromise is wherever possible for large communities like this, give them one council person versus 2. And so if some of that trade-off, if I look at the district where I live right now, and it's a sliver right now, almost like we're driving it out, it's almost like a snake, if you would, to accomplish trying to have a one representative for these large areas. I think that that's a sort of a trade-off in the discussion that we should be participating in as well.
Okay, if y'all don't mind, let me go to map 7, because we're dealing with 6. This is what I presented Saturday, and I made changes since then. Obviously, some of those changes still don't, they still may run into conflict with what Dr. Warren just talked about a minute ago, but it does recognize some changes have been made. So let's go to 7, because I did make some changes as of that meeting. And let me say that for the concerns of District 5, if y'all look at this, if you can see the screen up here and can see my cursor, What materially changed in 5 as a result of these changes that I made is really just this precinct here, because it looks like a large geographic area that's been bidden out. But for the most part, we're talking about roughly 2 precincts, okay? And if you add those 2 precincts back, you roughly have the same in 5. In fact, this part here that Dr. Warren referenced is already in 5. Bear Claire is already in 5. This is already in 5. This is already in 5. So essentially, everything that's already in 5, with the exception of maybe a few precincts along the line, is still in there. And the trade-off for that, for giving up a few precincts here, which, as I think that Marshall talked about, that this area almost has more in common with this area now anyway than it does with 5. Considering the trade-off, what do you get for that? You get to bring the entire Raleigh community together, and you essentially give Cordova a district that they don't have now. And the current map, if you look at the way it's drawn, I mean, unless there are reasons why you need to snake that far out, that would generally be called a gerrymander, quite frankly. And if it's a gerrymander for the sake of gerrymandering, then that's probably not good redistricting principles. Dr. Warren, I don't want you to miss this. I went to map 7 because map 6 was what we talked about Saturday, and I made changes based on similar concerns of yours. It still doesn't answer all of your concerns, but I went through, what I went through a second ago was essentially what's happening in 5. The area you referenced here, up here, is already in 5 currently. This area is in 5 currently. This area is in 5 currently. What's coming out of 5 is, I think 3 precincts perhaps, maybe 2.
You're taking Valentine Evergreen, okay, which is Midtown. So
Well, let me look at that. Let me blow that up.
It's right here.
Hang on, let's blow it up so we can see. But I want everybody to see the same thing. Hang on 1 second. There we go. All right. All right. Now, the area that you're referencing, Valentine Evergreen,
Yes. Right here, is Valentine Avenue. Right where Michael and Ethan Thomas live. That's in Evergreen on this side of Jackson. Right, this is Valentine Evergreen.
no, that's Valentine.
Yeah, but the name of the neighborhood is Valentine Evergreen. Yeah. Exactly. Right, but what I'm saying is that exactly is part of time. That is split. If you look at where, I guess maybe it's Super District 9 takes that part in. Okay, so that may be why I'm confused. Where's the original 5?
It's the map that says 2022 City of Memphis.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. See the back? Okay. So let's bring that back up. But I wanted to.
The original 5, you see here on Jackson right here.
Let me bring 22 up. I'll bring it up. There it is right there. Let's blow it up. Let's talk about that area. Let's go straight to it. It's going to take a minute. It's a big file. Let's scroll down.
Okay.
But it's only split because currently no.
But if you look at that district in the top, you can see this is Jackson right there, okay? And that's Valentine Evergreen.
Right.
Okay, and then.
But once you cross over Parkway, that's not.
Yeah, that's right. But that's, when I was talking about Valentine Evergreen, I was talking about that stuff.
So actually, the current map takes more of that community neighborhoods perspective dichotomy into account because North Parkway is your real division. When you, at least with those two, because they're actual verified historic districts with the city, Evergreen and Bethel.
And when you look at it though, the school pattern there is into Snowden.
Oh,
Right,
let
both
me-
of them go in the snow.
Let me bring
Yeah.
it back. Let me bring it back.
Both
up.
of them
I'm
go
sorry.
in the snow. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. proceed? Okay. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm going to bring 7 back up. So, as I said before, obviously there are trade-offs, and essentially what we're talking about is maybe 3 precincts. 1, 2, I think 3 precincts, maybe 2, but at least 3 precincts. But in return for that, that 1 precinct that we're concerned about here, and these precincts here, in return, you keep the Raleigh community mostly together, and you keep all of Cordova together. And so I guess we have to balance, and again, this is going to be up to the council, balance the need to keep 1 precinct where it wants to be now versus entire communities of 90, 80, almost 80,000 people together. And that's solely up to the council. I'm only just presenting this as we see it. But I will say, that, and I'm going to bring the current map up again, I will say this. Unless there is some compelling reason, community, demographic, political, population balance, that District 1 has to snake from the tip of the city line all the way to the tip of the city line in Eads. This would be, in most circles, considered a gerrymander because there's enough population to support a district, and to split a community arbitrarily for the sake of a few precincts, maybe throughout the districts, that could probably be split and maybe part of them put in. The splitting would actually perhaps help some of the things that we're talking about now, because you may be able to split something. Unfortunately, District 5 is one of the areas, along with District 3, with large, stable populations. And obviously, other areas that have declined had to take in some population. And what I tried to do was move things without dramatic, radical shifts as much as I could.
If you look at where 5 is now, you're talking about radical change. All the radical change came out of 5. Okay, pretty much.
No, because District 7 on these.
Well, no, I'm talking about, if you're talking about redrawing, okay, to where you've taken that community apart. So that District 5 community is now, been moved to 4 different districts.
With all due respect, Dr. Warren,
I'm just looking.
What's actually happening is there are a few precincts that have shifted in District 5. But if you look, let's look at where we are on this map. And then I wish I could set them up side by side, but it might be difficult to see. But what we have here is, and I'm going to follow my cursor, the area that's in question that we're talking about now is right here, up in here somewhere, okay? And then this area here, and this area here. This area here is still in the map. This area here is still in 5 under that map. This area is still in 5. This area is still in 5. Everything along these lines is in 5. And in fact, in that map, I also put this end of Central Gardens, which is now in 4, in 5. So there was some trade-offs there. And so where I moved some things up here to put Raleigh together and shifted some population, the impact is minimal, maybe not in the eyes of maybe that precinct. So I don't want to discount how people feel about their areas or their district, but I just want to be clear that this has not been butchered, but it certainly has been altered. But one has been altered as well. One has been brought from all the way across the other side of 240 to this side, and 2 is now a compact area in what's considered Cordova proper now. And there were some changes here in Central Garden from 4, although I did put Cooper Young back in 4, but left this area of Central Garden, this one big precinct here. Oh, it went off. I'm sorry. So were there changes? Absolutely, but not. And I know they appear that way because because those areas were in 5, but that's not the only place I made changes. I haven't finished yet. So your questions are probably going to move to other council members. I'm going to probably hear it from Councilwoman Robinson, and probably I'm going to hear it from Councilwoman Easter Thomas as well. So let me let them put the rod to me for a few minutes. So let's take a look at.
But also, as you go change it, Mr. Harris, while I'm in here, just some insight into what I'm thinking over here for mine. I think we can use the word drastic because they don't look like what we're used to. But with the thoughts of trying to keep neighborhoods and communities of interest, however you want to define it, together, I think is helping us make progress with our thinking. And as I look at the Plan 6 and Plan 7, you say 5's chopped up, 7's now all the way down by South Parkway. Which, as I say in my head, well, I'm familiar with South Memphis too, but then also I stopped myself because this map ain't about me. It's about the next 10 years. As we are, not guaranteed a spot, and it's not about our house and where we are, where those red dots are in the maps, which I see nobody currently on there was drawn out, however that you take that into account. But also remembering, I'll say it out loud as I said to myself in my head, map's not about me, and in my current position as of March 16th, 2023, or if we're in for a re-election or if we're termed out, it's for the next 10 years and looking at the cohesiveness and effectiveness of communities and neighborhoods in Memphis. So I'm trying to keep that in the forefront of my head as I'm looking through maps, and I charge anybody else and folks looking online to do the same thing. So I'm constantly telling this map is not about me and my spot and my position. My dot is within the new district drawn on Plan 6 and 7, but that means nothing. So trying to think about how neighborhoods are working together for the good of our city. Go ahead, Mr. Ayers.
So I heard you clearly that your district comes all the way to South Memphis. I think you said that twice. So duly noted.
I got family down there too, so but like I said.
so it's your turn to get me. So let me say this: if you look at the theme that I'm using, the central theme is trying to bring as many communities together as possible with the least amount of impact. So when I say least amount of impact, it does not mean you're not going to have a real impact. A change of 12 or a change of 5 or 6 or 7 precincts, that might be considered radical, but 2 or 3 probably not, but it looks radical. So on here, I heard, again, I got from the meeting Saturday, again, this is a result of what I heard Saturday, the people in downtown were not happy about having to have representatives from Mr. Ford, and I believe also half you and half Mr. Ford. And so the chairman brought that to my attention. So when I went back to do 6, and where 7 came from was changes I made from 6. So now what I've done is just consolidated downtown, but because of the way the precincts are structured, I had to bring you farther down south, also to pick up population as well, because some of those areas have lost population, so we had to move some things around. But it does consolidate. So now downtown has 1 city council person, at least under this plan. On Plan 7, it does. Yes.
Cordova is together.
And Cordova is together, and Raleigh is together. But again, I'm not finished.
Why Haven not it together anymore?
Because it's Councilwoman Robinson's turn.
Evergreen's not together.
And Evergreen's not together.
So who's more important? That's what it looks like we're talking about. Madam Chair, may I have
Turn on the mic. Yep.
my mic is on.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Communities are important, and I understand what we're trying to accomplish here. But when we bring in the words and start talking about precincts, I don't think that's important to us. What's important to the citizens of Memphis is who represents them in their community and keeping those communities together. We pay the Election Commission to orchestrate and carry out our plan so that we can have some kind of election that's professional. So I don't think we have to make a decision based on what they currently have, because we can go to them and say, this is how we want our communities to look. This is the representation that we want. So now you got to figure out what your precincts are going to look like, because we are not the county, we're the city, and it may not match what they currently have. And to me, that's not too far-fetched to ask them to, there may be polls in different places for the city than when you have a general across-the-board county election. I am concerned when I look at the new map is that now we have the west side of the city coming all the way, and we're not even using natural boundaries so people can understand. It's already difficult for the community, which I have represented for 21 years. Every time the news come on and something happens anywhere from the river to Oak Haven, they say it happened in Whitehaven. That is not true. And if we continue to set maps up like this, then the people are going to be even more confused, disenfranchised, and I'm doing my best to represent the community so that they can stay together, work together, and be a model for other communities so that we can have some continuity in our city. To come across the interstate and then bring another district in coming from the west as well, and then Karen, I look like I've got a whole leg going out east rather than blocking these areas off. And I know it's hard to make this looking at numbers, but we had the most growth in District 3, so I knew I would have to give up a lot of the communities in which I work with, but the Whitehaven block is important, not just to Whitehaven, but to the city as well. I don't understand why we have to divide. I'd already given up lots of Whitehaven, because the 38116 should be that district. That part of the district, it should have, I don't know what the new statistics, but the statistics from the last census, it increased a lot. But currently, we should have anywhere between 45 and 50,000 people, and I shouldn't have to pick up but 20,000 more. But I look like I'm giving up more, and then I'm getting the rest of my people somewhere out east when they are right here in this community. So what's happening with District 6 that they can't be more together, so that what happens downtown now has to be split between two different council districts? Can't we look at it just a little differently rather than around looking at precincts, but just the numbers and communities together, and then come back and talk about, now this is what we like to see, and then we just pay for what we have to pay for to make those precincts work with what we come up with. I don't believe I have to work with somebody else's plan. This is our plan for our city. This is a plan where we're trying to keep communities together so that those communities can start being models for other communities. But when you start splitting them up and doing what we're doing here today, then instead of having 1 or 2 problems, now you got 9 problems. We got to really look at this holistically, and not by precinct, but by the communities that are together. Look at your numbers and then work your way out. And then it's the election commission problem to figure out where they're going to have places for those people to vote.
Ms. Roberts.
Yeah. Chair, then Mr. Harris, then Mr. Moore.
Okay. As I'm looking at this, though, to address one of them, I go back to our school board days. Mm-hmm. Part of the issue is the Southwest Quadrant losing population.
I understand that.
So they're gonna have to come east to pick that up. Now, looking at yours, and as I was looking at it, if we look at our current 2022, so what,
Okay, which one? Which map is that?
the one that the council has already approved.
Why doesn't it just go to us and take
How about this one? Okay.
So if we look at this, I'm looking at yours, District 3. So I see Elvis Presley here.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have a few that are east of Elvis, that are west of Elvis Presley. 2 sections in purple.
Okay.
Now, if we go to, and I'm looking at, if we go to,
Look at Elvis Presley. It's a lot more than that. It's basically, I have the east side of Elvis Presley, and then
Right.
6 has the west side, but then there are some areas where you have both sides. So here, if we even looked at it a little differently than that, could we make it? And I don't have to have a number. It can be any number. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Can we pull maybe since they're losing population, keep Whitehaven together and pick up
7
the rest
is
of
losing,
that?
7 lost too. 6 and 7 lost.
Where are you? Right here.
Mm-hmm.
But that's up north. We ought to be able to reconcile that up north.
But also that's where, remember, Mr. Harris and Turnaway said when he brought us this last year, you can't just change one. Everybody got to shift and move wherever you putting the changes at. So when the changes were made on 7, because like on here, because y'all don't look at the part of the map, but 7 and 1 on this 2022 map is drastically different than it was prior because of population. Me and Rhonda used to do a puzzle piece. Like this, a little snake around in that Raleigh, Sky Lake area, but now it doesn't. And she's moved up, and then we have the different parts out there. I guess we don't go to east anymore. But that shift in population, like Jones is saying, I guess is what's impacting that. So it's back to somebody's plural district is going to look different because of population shifts in somebody's plural districts. Yeah.
So theoretically, without actually putting pen to paper now, if you look at map 7, and I knew Councilman Roberts was going to get me. I was waiting on her to get me as well. With the exception of the northwest part of Elvis Presley, and if you can look at, can you see my cursor moving? Can you see my cursor moving? Yeah. With the exception of this area here, and I think this was already in 6, and this area, all of this is all the same. So essentially, this is what you currently have now. Now, that wasn't in one of the other maps that I showed. So, but in this map, we made the change based on the discussion we had the other day. All of this is the same. In fact, I pulled in a portion that was actually in 6 that was like a little boot that came in. I actually pulled that out, and I'll show that to you in just a second. Yeah.
Down toward Timothy Road, it's not in there.
Yeah, but let me show you the boot on the other map. So if you can see the little boot here, let me go down. This is the current council map I have on the screen. So in the map that you have in 7, this little boot here is coming into there. I actually put that in 3, all right? And I took this section, so this is now in your district under Plan 7. This is y'all current map, okay?
So this is where you have the map that we're looking at currently. This is where you have the district cut off before you even get to the boot.
No, actually, I think if it's not on here, it's some changes I got to make. But I have replaced that, and if it's not on here,
It's not on there.
okay. Because let me say this. Last night about 1 a.m. I made some more changes that I just haven't had time to finish. Because every time I come to the meeting, I'm having to make more changes. But let me say this, Councilwoman Robinson, that boot that's in the middle there, that will be in 3 under the final 7 plan, or the revised 7 plan. What you will give up is the other boot. So there's a boot coming from 6 coming into you.
That's
that will
fine.
come back to you. The boot that's above you that you're booting in the 6 will go back to 6.
That's
So
fine.
what that will do is that will actually put most of this back in place. But there are a couple of blocks because the population is so big in that area. The area around Kazaza Creek or the old Kazaza Creek apartments up here is going to end up being
That's on
in
Winchester.
6. That's going to end up being in 6 under the revised plan. Okay, but all of the things that you already had, including the boot that you don't have, will be in there.
Okay.
That last revision I haven't had a chance to make because I made some changes at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to shift this around. I just didn't have time to present that. But let me also address the issue of why can't we move 6 more north? If I move 6 north, which is lost population, then I got to move 7, which is lost population. Which the only place to move 7 is east, which will further eat into 5, and probably bleed over into your precinct in 5.
What if you have a Fraser
We should be talking about precinct.
you have a
Just talk
Fraser and a
about
Raleigh
people in
district?
That's insane.
That'd be 7.
What essentially what you will end up doing is you'll end up having to make the District 1 district that's part of Raleigh now, that where Raleigh has been put together, you'll essentially have to take that back out to a Cordova again. So you back where you started from. And right now what you have is essentially sort of a Fraser downtown, part of the sliver of South Memphis district for 7. And 6 is a general South Memphis, Southwest district. And 3 is really most of the populated Whitehaven. Because again, looking at this spatial data, we're looking at pictures. The bottom line is in the middle of 3 is the airport. Okay? And there's not a lot of population in that big section. So there's a huge section there that's colored that looks like it's part of a map and part of a district, but it's industrial for the most part in the airport. However, it is a precinct. So some of that now is in, the top part of that is in 6 because it needed to pick up population from the north side. 6 has lost population, 7 has, so the two of them have to shift. The more stuff you do with 6 and 7 to achieve the other stuff, you're gonna chop Midtown even more. And right now, contrary to what we talked about before, what's considered central Midtown, the vast majority of Midtown is together, with the exception of 1 precinct on the west side and maybe 1 precinct on the north central side. That's not a great trade-off if you're those 2 precincts.
You brought Raleigh all the way down
To pick up population.
That's what I'm saying.
I had to do that to pick up population.
That's not making nations.
Well, it did.
In that particular situation.
Well, yes, it did because it put the entire Raleigh area back together again. So yes, I had to pick up population, but all of these areas, East Memphis is not Midtown. Berkeley is not Midtown, but the 5 Midtown district runs to Berkeley today, and it runs to Berkeley under my map. Those are 2 different areas, but you had to do that for population. Unfortunately, 5 and 3 has the population. They're going to end up changing some under any scenario when you redistrict because you got to give up something for those areas that actually lost. So
if we look at Mr. Wade's map that he's presented to us, it's got very little change in it. And it's been able to make that work with very little change.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay. Why
on
would
where
we?
you-
Well, I'm just saying.
I think it depends on where you are.
Yeah, but I
because that 7 and 1 has been a constant split. 7, 1, and 5 has been a constant split in communities and neighborhoods consistently from that map to the prior map. So
I'm seeing here,
Yeah.
but everything sort of is staying in the same general geographic area. As you look at the map makes more sense geographically.
not if you live in Cordova, because your community is completely split, and you have the population. You have the population to support a district, and to split a
But
community.
you could say the same thing for that Midtown in East Memphis. They have a population to support a district. If you just take that Papa quarter and run it straight down.
If
or
you run
y'all
the
can have folk move to District 7 and District 6. Then we even it all out, Miss Bennett.
That'll work.
I'm concerned about trying to, I'm just going to speak forthrightly, maintain the status quo for whatever reasons, whether it's in reference to what you said earlier about being mindful that these maps are for 10 years, and we have to be mindful, are these maps being drawn for council persons, or are they being drawn for the good of community members? And I keep hearing many statements that give me the impression as a community member that some of these concerns are more about the council person and not necessarily what's best for the communities within the larger community of Memphis. We've had population shifts, but there are some shifts that there are some things that have been constant when we talk about representation in Memphis. In my opinion, based upon what I've seen, a great deal of representation is controlled by a minority of people, a minority of communities with the way this map is drawn, and that those interests don't necessarily benefit the city at large. So I just think it's important to keep in mind something that we talked about from the very first meeting of this committee, that we do need to look at the census data. We need to look at the numbers and the legal requirements. And part of that is also looking at communities that have been historically disenfranchised and not represented. And do we want to keep this 2022 map that is drawn in a way that, as Chairperson Jones said earlier, y'all never even saw precinct data, but you voted on and accepted this map. Now we're getting information, and I'm saying we because I'm a part of the committee, we're getting information that helps us make a better informed decision about what's the best way to make sure there's fair representation for all communities and community members, and not just those who have historically maintained an unfair share of representation and their needs being met in our community. I think that's central, and I think we've forgotten that from meeting number one, and that's something that needs to come back to us from time to time. I know there's limited time, but that needs to come back to us as the considerations are made.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Moore, I'm sorry, I definitely forgot about that, but Mr. Moore, then Councilman Warren.
As a community member, a part of this committee, we have to understand that this redistricting is not about who's in office right now. It's about redrawing district maps that represent the community and trying to keep them as whole as possible. But we're not gonna ever have a map that's perfect. We're gonna split some precincts, we're gonna split some communities. But we got to do this in a manner that is not for our own personal reason, not for my district or my community, but for this city as a whole to be represented. And as Chairman Thomas said earlier, it's for 10 years. We got to do this right. And we don't have a whole lot of time to do this right because it was held up so long. But I commend this council for even having a real committee, a committee with citizens' input. But we have to overlook what we want for me and do what's right for the community as a whole at best.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with the sentiments that previously already mentioned. I'd also like to point out that if you look at our current council makeup, it actually is about the same percentage of population of the city.
No, it's not, Jeff.
We're maybe
No, it's not.
5 or 10% more
Nope.
Caucasian.
Nope.
Right
Nope.
now,
Nope.
we're
Jeff.
okay.
Alan said
so if
the white
purpose of-
white
is it-
population is 25% of Memphis' population.
And-
If you extrapolate that to 13, three white council members.
Okay, so that's our goal.
No, what I'll go, we should be talking about proportionate representation. That's redistricting. When I first got on the council, what I said that our job is to advocate for proportional distribution of resources. Now, that's the start of it. Proportional distribution of resources. Now, when we talk about, and the part that I made to Mr. Wade was, when we looked, if what he's done over the years is
Mr.
just,
Jones?
yes.
Let me finish my statement, then I'll be glad to let you do yours. So what I was saying is I'm not running in District 5. I'm representing it because, I live there. There's a difference between representing what people are doing and having a political agenda, which I don't. Okay, I do look at this and I see it sort of being carved up, and I can understand that, if you want to give downtown one district and you want to give Cordova one district, then what you're doing is you're saying we don't want to keep the district that we have. And that's a choice that the council will make based on the recommendations coming from here. But it's not about keeping the status quo as much as is trying to keep the neighborhoods that I represent together. So that's what I'm coming from. So that District 5 map doesn't have anything to do with where I'm at. So I just want you to know that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about trying to not have that one all carved up if there's another way to do it. And I think if you look at what the map does to District 3, okay, it changes it dramatically. And I think Ms. Robinson mentioned that. In my mind, I think if we go back and we don't use the precinct model and we actually look at what the neighborhoods look like, we can get something that will create a map that can last 10 years and be what we want as far as proportional relationships or representation. So I'd like to see that if possible before we vote. Thank you.
Before Councilwoman Robinson and then Mr. Harris, Councilman Warren, can you talk more about when you say you want to see more neighborhoods and communities together? How would you like that distinction and designation to be done? Are you looking at geographical street boundaries?
Well,
Are you looking
one
at
of the
community
things
associations?
I was sort of looking at what I was looking at was I was like, if you take the Midtown area, okay, which is where I'm from, that's a more liberal part of the city. If you have a liberal part of the city district and you take the eastern part and then you have a conservative part district, that guarantees you have liberal and conservative representation on the council. So now you're no longer talking about black and white, you're talking about different political views on the council for us to be able to make decisions. I think you can do that in such a way you could probably put Cordova together and downtown and other things, but I'd like to see what those numbers look like if instead of looking at precincts, which I think we're hamstringing Mr. Harris, and we just look at neighborhoods and then split precincts to make the neighborhoods work.
Would the example you brought up, would a conservative versus liberal neighborhood have its place on a nonpartisan council?
Yes, if we actually have conservative and liberal parts of town. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the issues that you will be bringing from Fraser may be different than the issues you're going to be bringing from Cordova or from Whitehaven. So the idea that you can if you have Fraser and downtown together, you got a downtown district, but now you have a downtown Fraser district. So that's, again, a split neighborhood type district. So as we're looking at how we're doing this, we're still making decisions that are splitting neighborhoods and putting different interest groups together. How do we get an interest group that is based on political and social communities and make a map that gives us something so everyone in that venue has representation?
Even though we're nonpartisan?
Even though we're nonpartisan, yeah.
Okay. Councilwoman Robinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate all the work that has happened here. And I don't want to make it seem like that this is about Patrice Robinson and District 3. I have served that district for 21 years. I will not be serving it any longer than the end of this year. But I do think it's important for the people who live there that I have represented to be able to be in a block together. I have no problem with the Westwood side or whatever 3rd Street side. I have represented them all the way up to Horn Lake Road in the first place. That is not my issue. My issue is that we've talked about keeping communities together. So if that's what we're going to do, we need to try to do that for all the communities. Try to keep them together as much as possible. But if that's not what I'm just trying to make sure that we're consistent, because I have to go back and tell the people in the Whitehaven area that I allowed, that I allowed here as we're sitting and looking at maps for them to be districted in another district, and they are not a part of the Whitehaven community that they are used to being in, and we work so hard to improve and share with other communities. So as you look at the district, it goes way over to Riverdale, and that area deserves to have some attention as well. But when you spread it out so long, you're getting 3 or 4 different communities together. If we could try to pull 1 or 2 together rather than 4 or 5 or 6, because that's what's happening now in my current district. They don't have anything in common. So what makes it very difficult for whoever serves in that seat is that now you have, when I have meetings, I have to have a meeting for the Whitehaven area, then the area at Tullahoma and Oak Haven. Then I have to do Hickory Hill. Then there's another section that wants to have something different. And all of them have different personalities. And they don't have the same interests. So if I had just one meeting, then they get angry because they don't want to talk about what the people want to talk about in this particular community, because this is the thing that's important to us in this community. And we have to look at it as communities more than just land mass and where numbers are. I know numbers are important, and where polls are, I know that may be important to the Election Commission, but for our communities, we want them to be like communities where people can work together and that we can get this work done in an efficient and effective manner. I know for a fact that chopping it up more is actually more confusing and it's disenfranchising. And if we can keep communities together like we're talking about, but some get to keep it and some don't, well, what are the rules around it? How are we going to tell them that we were able to keep Cordova together, but we couldn't keep your community together? How are we going to explain that to a community? Well, we decided we'd do 5 miles outside of each of the districts. We got to be able to have some definite information. And what I'm concerned about is that when we try to keep communities together, maybe we do 2 or 3 together, but 5, 6, or 7, it just does not work for the citizens of Memphis, and that's not fair to them. It really isn't fair, and it's not fair to the person that represents them either, because then they're trying to operate in that vein, and if they have a job, they can't do it. I was able to do it because I had the time to do it, but nobody else is going to be able to do that, and we have to keep all that in mind. Communities deserve to be together, and if we can keep them together as much as possible, I would appreciate if we look at the mapping more like that. Downtown may be a little difficult because they split north and south, and I don't know how to take north and south and put them together, but Dee does a great job of mapping and talking about that. And the community in the north part of downtown is actually different from the community in the south part of downtown. So when you start pulling those together, they don't actually have like interests. Talk to them. I have.
It sounds like y'all making a case for single-member districts, but that's not what we're doing here. But I just want that'll be on the record if anybody brings that up in the near future.
But do you understand what I'm saying?
I agree with what you're saying, but I also want to say that if these maps aren't fair, the ones we have currently aren't either. So we just need to keep that in mind that we ain't starting from fair. So let's just
That's a good point.
keep that in mind. But y'all made great cases for Kingdom districts. Mr. Moore and then Mr. Harris.
You pretty much summed up what I was getting ready to say about more district and single member district if we gonna talk about what Councilwoman Robinson just spoke about.
Just know y'all heard from Councilwoman Robinson and Councilman Warren first. Mr. Harris?
So let me go on the record again, and I want to make this clear. When we say we're chopping up, from the original map, there were precincts that were shifted. Just like precincts were shifted in the current process you guys have used over the years. Around the margins, and I hadn't looked at all of them, precincts were shifted. And so nothing was chopped up. I got to make that clear. I did not chop up 5. There are 2 precincts. And obviously we talked about splitting precincts and how we could maybe work that through. That's actually fair game. But please, we're talking about a couple of precincts. So there's 1 precinct on the northwest side. There's 1 in the north central side and maybe 1 on the east that was changed and shifted. But with the exception of those 3, I believe, precincts, District 5 is exactly the same with the exception of 3 precincts. But because of where it's occurring, it looks dramatic. But the entire Midtown Poplar corridor is actually intact. The Binghamton portion of the area, with the exception of maybe Valentine Evergreen, but the rest of it, if you trace the map 7, you can take it straight down Midtown to Poplar. And also, by the way, added Central Gardens into 5 that wasn't in 5 at first. So I tried to respect that as much as possible. The problem is people don't live in chunks of 90,443. And if the council wants community districts, I would suggest there's only so many times and so many ways you can split districts, even at the precinct level, to achieve what everybody's trying to achieve, because we have to have 90,443. So if everybody wants what they want, I said this in a meeting and I was corrected, that if you want community maps or community districts, then what you want is single districts. And that's what the council voted against. So what we have now, as someone said, is not quite fair. And what I tried to do was do the least painful thing in each area to achieve fairness across the board, which required change in every area. And obviously, every area is extremely important. And look, I don't live in Cordova, so let me first say that. I don't have any special affinity to Cordova, but I've been involved in redistricting for quite a while now, and I've seen across the country and locally efforts to split up communities for political reasons, for partisan reasons, for political reasons, for incumbent reasons, for racial reasons. And it is always good redistricting principles when you have an area that is split in half. None of the areas that we just talked about a minute ago where we had folks that were not happy about movements were split in half. Precincts were moved, areas were shifted. But you have an area of town where it's literally being split in 2, and there's no reason to do it, but you're splitting it in 2 to achieve other gains in other areas. And so the question relies, I guess, the council is, if the council wants to keep the current map, that's fine, but it's unfair to some folks as well. So all I'm trying to do is bring as many communities together with the tools that I have to work with today or yesterday.
Just one real quick question. If you were able to go back and look at these maps, okay, without precincts, determining how you do it, can you make them more uniform and more neighborhood friendly in the situations that we're talking about here? Can you do that, and can we have a look at that? That's what I'm wondering. If you can do it without, and assume that you're going to have multiple split precincts, okay, but you're going to keep, neighborhoods closer together and do similar things like you've done in 7. With splitting the map, not looking at precincts. Can you do that and do a better job?
Yes and no. So yes, I can make an attempt. I can't say until I finish what it would look like. That's yes. The no part is I am sure when I do that, I'm still going to run into a buzzsaw because of population levels and the differences of population, there's still going to be some shifts. Maybe not as seemingly dramatic as they are now. So it might make you less unhappy, But I
Yes,
think there will
understand.
still be people unhappy when we finish, no matter how we slice it, without single member districts. So I just want to say that. So yes and no.
Mr. OJ and then Chairman Jones.
Yeah, just on that same topic, just with the work that I do, like I've looked at it at the census block level, which is actually the smallest like group we can break it into, and it still breaks up neighborhoods, like especially that when I was looking at it, because I live in Binghamton, when you're looking at where Overton Park is, where Evergreen is, where Valentine is, and where Binghamton is, the census blocks break it up too. Not as bad as the precincts, because the precincts are kind of ridiculous looking, in my opinion, but we'll still have those same issues, just not as large.
I received a text message I just wanted to share. So this is somebody out of the 25 or 30 of us in here. There's a 36th person, well, a 16th person paying attention to this, but they said that split precincts cause a lot of confusion on the ground level. So when we're talking about doing this and we're talking about people, and so I go back to what Mr. Harris said. We have a larger number of voters, but the Election Commission has shrunk the number of precincts. So if we sought to do that and split the precincts, I just think that we're causing a whole whirlwind, greater amount of confusion than what we're doing right now.
So I don't think there's not anything that would preclude them other than their own decision making from increasing the number of precincts. So, but that's a whole different animal.
We have no control over that,
we have
Mr.
no
Harris.
control
So
over
Does the
that.
county commission have control of
No,
that?
that's a state issue. And
So
that's likely
this is
not to happen. This
we
goes through
still are
election.
in a voter suppression southern part of the United States with a Republican-controlled General Assembly, with a Republican-controlled election commission in a democratically heavy city and county that has decided to shrink voting places when we have a larger number of registered voters.
But I will make an attempt to take a look at, because I did split some precincts here to achieve some things. I split a few. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but we're likely to have something that you like less than you dislike less now, but you will still dislike something about it. But I will take another stab at it because we're only talking about a few precincts here anyway. But I cannot say because of population centers that we can put everything that's currently, because otherwise then you'd have the same map you have now. And that's an option.
Yeah, I know when we're doing this, we have a change. Everybody's going to get a letter that says, now you're voting here. And that's the precinct for your address where you're going to vote. And your neighbor across the street, may be at a different precinct to vote, but you're going to be voting in the same district, just at a different precinct. So what's going to happen is we're going to have some chaos as we change this because everyone's going to have something different. I'm sure split precincts cause problems, but changing districts cause problems. We just have to make sure as we move forward, everyone gets a chance to know where they need to go vote and we get them there. Because that's going to be more important than anything else we can do. And we look at it and it's chaos, then at least we've given it a shot. That's what I want to see. If we give it a shot, what it looks like. And then we come back and, we can see what the council will vote for.
Frankly, I don't think you'll have necessarily chaos from the vote because at least the way I'm looking at it, because I'm looking at solely trying to keep as many communities together. It might look like chaos on a precinct sheet for the election commission, but it might not be chaos for the people because it's closer to their homes. So what's causing this is the election commission, not necessarily what we're doing. So we'll take a look at it because I've already split some. And we'll see what we can do to limit the number of splits to try to achieve some of the movement. Councilwoman Robinson, I've already got her issue and concern already on the table. I just didn't have it ready to present today.
Councilman Jones was, okay, go ahead, Councilwoman.
I had
Robinson.
one other question. And so I see on the east end that District 3 will be going across Germantown Road. That has another different personality. I'm going, so there's no way that we can incorporate that area with the going north?
They would have to go in 2 or they would have to go in 4. and they are currently in 2. But
What
you're
happened with the
stretching
numbers? That's
well,
what I'm talking about.
I gave Cordova their own district, so I moved that up. So I changed 2.
Okay,
I basically made 2 more Cordova-centric, so to speak, which left an area down in the southeast open, and you needed to pick up population on the east. Those people needed to go somewhere. Otherwise, it would just be the same map. So I put them in 3. They probably could have gone in 4. I drew a map that put them in 4, but then it shifted other stuff in 5, and it it made things worse than it is now. The most logical place to put them in terms of population, not community. I know you're about to get me, Councilwoman Robinson, was to put them in 3. Because right now, 3.
so I'm talking about personalities of communities.
But right now, 3, other than these others, go the most southeast, for lack of a better phrase, right now, today. It's just going more southeast.
Okay.
So,
That's in District 9.
I'm not talking about that. So let me just ask one other question. So if it's that important to keep Cordova together, but it's not important enough for these people to be a part of that group because the personality of the community, actually, though they all work together, I see them at the polls on Riverdale because when they do the elections where we have county elections as well, they don't know if who they're to vote for. And that's what's so confusing about this, because at that poll, you have the city elections, you have the county elections, and can I vote for certain people? That becomes a problem.
So currently, those folks on the southeast will either be in 2, they will either be in 3, or they will either be in 4. If I put them in 5, I'd have to stretch 5 all the way across something.
We don't want to do that. But 2 looks like it's the best place for them.
Well, then they stretch from the most southeast part of the city all the way up to the most northeast part and the northeast part of Cordova. So then you got the same map. So that's an option because that's the current map that's on the table now. And if it's that important, then you can leave it the way it is. It was a way to shift population. Again, I know it doesn't necessarily seem ideal, but anytime you move one thing, you move something else. And logically and geographically and from a population standpoint, there's only a few places for them to go, and that would be 2. They don't necessarily have to be in 3. They could be in 4, but that would change some stuff along the lines in 4 as well, which would probably affect 5 and probably affect 6. So while the inconvenience of having them added to 3, right now, 3 already runs almost to that area anyway, to that southeastern part.
We go up to Riverdale.
Yeah,
now we're going past
you'd be going past that.
Germantown.
You'd be going past that. Yes, that's true. But as I said, it is right now the district that goes the farthest southeast today, besides 2. And if you leave it in 2, then you got the same map that you have now. Now, we can fix the other part, which I've already fixed. I just don't have it presented today. The Whitehaven issues. That's going to be fixed, but it will stretch out there. Now, the other alternative would be to move 6 over further to the east, and it become the Whitehaven district. So there was one map that I presented that put all of Whitehaven together in one area, in one district. You can do that, but there's nothing that's called District 3 anymore. So that it changes the whole dynamic there, because 6 can only fall in the river or go east.
Okay.
And so that's so 6 and 7 are geographically constrained just by the river and by geography and other stuff. So we only can go north, south, east, and west. And anytime we go a direction, we change the number of people. Forget about precincts, the number of people, and then we change the composition of the districts themselves. Again, what I tried to do here was not make this painless, because there was no way to redraw the districts and not change something. But what I tried to do was limit the amount of change to a less painless. Painful would be to take 6 all the way. It would have been easy to draw 6 all the way on the other side of Elvis Presley, all the way to almost to Oak Haven. It would have been extremely easy. But it wouldn't. It would have been very painful for me in this meeting, because you would have got me. So that would have been easy. But it would have
And
been
then-
painful also because it would have again split Oak Haven, Whitehaven again, but it would have put most of Whitehaven together. It would have been extremely painful to chop off 5 somewhere else. But what I did was I moved a few precincts. And as a sweetener for moving Sam Cooper, Binghamton, I added Central Gardens, well, a portion of Central Gardens. And I gave back Cooper Young to District 4 so that I wasn't taking so much from them. So for every group, I gave something and I took something away, but it was minimal, a couple of precincts. When looking at spatial data, it looks worse than it is because we're looking at spatial data. But all these blocks represent people, communities, census tracts, and census blocks. And the naked eye just doesn't tell the whole story, unfortunately. But it's not necessarily perfect. Again, it's not perfect science. We can go back and look at it again. But I tried to spread the pain around as much as I could, and I tried to spread as much love as I could.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Hold on, Councilman Warren. Councilman Jones, Mr. Moore, and then we're going to wrap it up. So if you
One
want to say
thing we have to
something.
consider, everybody that's here, is that we don't have a lot of time. We do not have a lot of time, and so I've asked Council Chair Easter Thomas and we'll ask this of Mr. Wade. We were given a date, but we need to know if there's any type of flexibility in that particular day. So even from the standpoint of getting, even if we can go to what would be the first week or the first meeting in May, that being the third reading. So, that would be June, July, August, September, 4 months for the Election Commission to do what they have to do. So I don't know if that was an absolute certain drop dead. We can't do it by then. But still, to that point, colleagues, though, we made a change for District 4 leading up to an election in a shorter period of time than what we're talking about here. And granted, this is a greater amount of data that they have to provide. So I just still want to present that, and that we have that for contemplation. And when we approved all of these changes to District 4. There were some voters that were represented at the time that once the election took place, they were not represented, vice versa, along those things. And so I want us to keep that in mind. We've done this before. We did it. We did it for an election that just took place. Now, and so I just wanted to point that out. What would be helpful, especially if we are able to continue this, is if we can have a big printout sitting in here, because I still think that we're talking about shifting this. But if we're looking at those numbers, because I remember one of them, you had a precinct with 11,000 folks next to 2,000. And so as we're doing this, we know that there's a cascading effect when we do that. And it's, if we still can sort of see it graphically with those numbers in there, we can say, oh, okay, well, we know we can't necessarily shift this or shift that and shift that. So, as we have that next meeting, when we have that next meeting, I think it'll still be helpful if we have something. And, from time to look, I'm sitting here, you all are discussing, I can go over there and look at it. And, just have that reference point. So it's a large map of what would be helpful would be that population or the precinct and population part, and then where we currently are right now for everybody here to go back and reference, since we can't split the screen and have multiple objects on there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Moore and then Councilwoman Johnson.
I keep hearing about different personalities and communities. The citizens of Memphis, when it all boils down, just about have the same concerns, no matter where you live, whether you live in South Memphis or Whitehaven, North Memphis or Cordova. So districts having more than one group of people in it is irrelevant. We just need to make sure we're not dramatically gerrymandering, cracking and packing, and have something to present from this committee to the entire council as a whole and move forward.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you. Dr. Harris, is it possible for you to bring the live data and use GIS here in the committee? So when we can see the different layers. You can bring them in. They can see the population. They can see if you move and shift what could possibly happen.
All right, let me do that real quick because I know.
Okay. Okay.
Let me deal with District 5. If we do what we talked about a minute ago, what precinct was that? Was that this precinct? Or? All right, so that's 5 down there. And so where is that precinct that we talked about that was in question? Balltown Evergreen? Right here? Right here. All right, so let's assume we took that and put that in 5, okay? Here's what happens. 5 becomes 95,000, all right? Well, what did I have that in, 7? 7 becomes 85,000. So it would dramatically shift that. And it would put us close to our deviation levels. And so that's the problem because the populations in the precincts are not symmetrical. So this is live. This is what would happen. And so we could do the same thing down here, and I got to remember what I'm doing so I don't mess something up. The same thing, and I won't bring up RGIS. I'll just work in this tool because it's quicker. Let's just say we want all of Whitehaven proper in 3. Okay, let's do that. All right, let's take that. Let's put that in there. Now look what happens. Now it's at 95,000. District 6 is at 84,000. Won't meet legal standards. So that's what I'm doing, shifting around the margins, trying to cause at least. Now, obviously, this precinct is already in District 6, but I'm just showing you, because Whitehaven is so big, if I gave you every stretch of it, you'd have 100,000 something plus. Even if I took out the eastern part of it, those people have to be districted somewhere, would throw something else off. So every time you change one thing, you end up invariably changing something else. And if you look at these numbers over to the side, you'll see the precincts, the sizes over to the side. So when you change something, you invariably throw something else off because you have to meet that population deviation number. And so what I tried to do was nibble around the edges and move a precinct here or there. 1 precinct, 2 precinct. It looks dramatic and you don't like it, but the bottom line is if you look at what is these areas proper, they haven't changed that much. If you look at the expressway, if you go live and look at, for example, here, I put that in there. Let me put that back. I think I had that in 7, I believe. I had that in 7. Let me put that back in 7 so that this balances back out. So let's take a look at this. Let's blow it up. Let's look at the streets. The way I have it now, I don't know if I put that back in. This is Midtown, okay? This is Poplar. This is your precinct, Dr. Warren. This is the Poplar Midtown corridor. See, that's all in 5. Obviously, this used to be in 5, okay, this part here, okay? But the Poplar corridor follows along. Look, we haven't gone off Poplar. Here it is. There we are with Union. There are those areas. There's Chickasaw Gardens, still in 5, still in 5, still in 5. This area was already in 5. Nothing really changed there. Let's keep going. The only difference is there were some changes out here along the margins. I think some of this was out, some of this was in, but the vast majority of it stayed the same, and you picked up this area here, which is Central Gardens, which actually used to be in District 4 in the current map. So while it looks dramatic, it's not really that dramatic. All you really lost was this, all right? And to replace that, you got Central Gardens. So you got actually more of Midtown under this plan than you had at first. And you still follow the Midtown Poplar corridor. The spatial, looking at spatial data can be extremely misleading. Now, would it look smoother to add this area? But this is not really Midtown, okay? This is Sam Cooper. This was in 5, granted, but it's not Midtown. 5 as it is now? $87,794. So these are the trade-offs. Anytime you change something else. So for example, let's put that back in 5 real quick. It won't take us very long. It'll be quick. All right, let's put that back in 5. All right, what did we do? What are we at now? We got 96. We're legal. No, let's get it all. Okay, now we're at 100,000. Now we're at 100,000. Now we're at 110. Mm-hmm.
We didn't draw that line.
No.
The election commission drew that. So
Right.
what would it make it nice and square and even?
Yeah.
But if you had the opportunity and you could just go through and draw the lines and put the population based on the neighborhood and what makes sense to keep it sort of contiguous, because as you're looking at this, the spatial data is confusing, but you do know neighborhoods by the spatial data. Neighborhoods are spatial. Okay, some of them are more populous than others, and that's what's making it difficult. So I guess the question is, if you're looking at the neighborhoods proper and you divide them up, and even if you split the precincts, can you make that to where it's a little bit more common sense for people as they look at it? Because, you know, we've got a committee, we've been studying this for multiple meetings. It's still complicated because of this precinct thing that we didn't draw, that we're trying to make this thing overlay. So if there's a way we can ignore it and then, you know, just send everybody their card about you're voting at this precinct, okay, and this is your district. I don't know, but you bring it to us, and if it looks horrible and it's crazy, then we're going to have to make our best choice from here.
So let me give a quick example. I know it's getting late. So when we talk about splits, so that has been done, and I'm going to show y'all what you're splitting, and you do it by blocks. So you can do it by precincts, census tracts, or blocks. In this scenario, I had to split an area here. Let me bring this up, and let me bring this up, okay? So unfortunately, when we talk about how the precincts are shaped, this is a real problem because here in the Glenview area, this was a real problem because this precinct runs here, it runs here, and it runs here. All right. So in order to give Cooper Young back, because Cooper Young, under the current map that you have today, part of Cooper Young is on this side of the tracks, and part of it on this side of the tracks. So what I did was I basically combined it so that all of Cooper Young would be here and would be back in 4. But I gave the rest of Central Gardens to District 5. So yes, you can split, and here I split a precinct here. You see where this purple area is here? All of this actually is in this same precinct. See that funny looking thing? That funny looking animal? So yeah, you can do that. And so I did some of that along the margins to give some things back and pull some things over. The problem with some of the midtown precincts is the population levels are so big that when you move something, it's more dramatic, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. And then also showing us the live thing. Yeah, this illustration is super helpful to see, you know, as you super helpful to see it, and just to see how that's done at the click of a button. But you also, Chairman Jones made mention of that we may, depending on the answer from Attorney Wade, be having to make some decisions about timelines. So we will be sending out a memo to Attorney Wade asking 3 things. One, that Ms. Bennett brought up about the virtual attendance, to see if you have to be, would you be considered a citizen or not, just getting a clear answer for that. Also to see if we have any flexibility on the date or range of dates given to us by the Election Commission, especially using the example of just last year, no play fighting in the audience. And then thirdly, come on now. Y'all funny. And then thirdly, if we are needing an extra meeting or not to be able to get in that 3rd reading, but that would also be dependent upon if we have the flexibility or not. Sure. So we'll send those in to Wade as a memo. I do want folks to get down that March 20th, mapping subcommittee will meet again. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are too. I haven't.
Monday.
Yeah, can we get that?
Yeah, we can. And this is also just putting it out there too. Mr. Backus is getting in March 20th, Monday. Mapping subcommittee will meet again at 5. What do y'all mean?
So that we make sure we meet the threshold, can we say 5:45 or 6?
5.
Because it's
Okay.
5:35.
Okay. So 5:30.
Meet at 5, start at 5:30.
It means for the 48-hour notice since it's Thursday.
Oh,
Does that include the weekends?
yes.
Okay. So 5. All right, so meeting Monday at 5, council meeting Tuesday. Also, the next redistricting committee will be Wednesday, 3:30. Because I assume that, Mr. Harris and the rest of the subcommittee are gonna meet, do some things that we need to bring back to full committee, especially depending upon our timeline. And then also if council members are attending NLC on the next week, we just wanna make sure that we're here, for that. Are there anything else? Any other new business comments, questions? Councilwoman Johnson.
A comment again, I think we also need to ask Attorney Wade, how much time is he going to need to do the review?
I'll put that in the memo. Okay. Time needed for review. Okay. Anyone else? Any comments or questions from anyone in the audience? No? Thank you for joining us today. And that's also those for us online, folks here in the audience. No other business. I claim this redistricting committee of the Memphis City Council adjourned.